She thought it was a rash, until the dog found this. Ashwood Pines was the kind of small town where nothing ever seemed to change. Old porches sagged, fences leaned, and people kept their secrets tucked behind closed doors. When Nora Vance returned from her military deployment, she believed she was coming home. Instead, she walked into a nightmare. Her daughters, Clara and Elise, were thinner than she remembered, their eyes downcast, their little arms covered in red marks. Rachel, her late wife's friend and the girl's caretaker, dismissed as a detergent allergy. But Nora's instincts, sharpened by years of service, screamed otherwise. And then came Elise's whisper. "Mommy, it whispers under my pillow." It might have been dismissed as a child's dream, if not for Kael. The German shepherd stiffened, ears pricked, and began clawing at the bed. When Nora pulled back the pillow, what they found was not just terrifying. It was deliberate. A syringe. Strange, red-glowing insects. Evidence that someone was hurting her children on purpose. From that night on, Nora swore nothing and no one would touch them again. The rain had been falling since dawn, a steady silver curtain that blurred the edges of the mountains and turned the pine forest into a shivering wall of shadows. Ashwood Pines always seemed older when it rained, as though the town itself carried memories too heavy to share. Nora Vance drove slowly through the narrow main road, her wipers beating an uneven rhythm across the windshield. The headlights of her government-issued sedan cut through the mist, illuminating the cracked pavement and sagging telephone wires that lined the street. She hadn't been home in nearly a year. It felt longer. Overseas deployments had a way of stretching time until days bled into months, months into something unmeasurable. Beside her, in the passenger seat, Kael lifted his broad head and pressed his nose against the fogged glass. The German shepherd's coat, once a glossy black and tan, bore scars across his flank and a pale streak near his left ear, where the fur had never grown back. His amber eyes tracked every shape moving beyond the glass, shadows of trees swaying in the storm, the flutter of a stray plastic bag caught in the wind. Kael wasn't restless. He was measuring the town the way soldiers measure a battlefield, searching for changes, cataloging threats, sensing the invisible. Nora let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The air smelled faintly of damp cedar and wet asphalt, a smell she remembered from childhood bike rides and summer storms. It should have been comforting, but instead it pressed against her chest, heavy and familiar in a way that felt almost suffocating. Ashwood Pines hadn't changed much. The grocery store still hunched at the corner of Willow and Main, its faded sign flickering between light and shadow. The diner's neon letters glowed weakly through the downpour. But there was a silence here, deeper than she remembered, as if the whole town was holding its breath. She tightened her grip on the wheel. "You've been gone too long." Kael gave a soft chuff, a sound somewhere between a sigh and a warning. Nora glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, despite the knot in her stomach. "I know, buddy," she murmured. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" The dog's ears flicked, acknowledging her words, then returned to scanning the streets. As they passed the old church, Nora slowed. The paint had peeled away from the siding, and the bell tower leaned ever so slightly, as though time had bent it. In the churchyard, gravestones glistened with rain, names blurred by water and distance. One in particular pulled her eyes, though she didn't let herself stop. Sarah Monroe. Her sister. The grief was quieter now, but never gone. Nora blinked, refocused on the road. The mission was different this time. She wasn't here as a captain or as a soldier. She was here as a mother. Clara and Elise, her girls. She had left them in the care of Rachel Monroe, Sarah's widow, when the Air Force called her back. It had never sat right, but she had told herself it was temporary, necessary. Now, driving through this rain-soaked town, unease crept along her spine like cold water. The houses grew smaller as she neared the edge of town, yards overrun with weeds, fences leaning at odd angles. Children should have been playing, even in the drizzle, splashing in puddles, chasing each other with raincoats flapping. But the streets were empty. Curtains twitched as her car passed, eyes peering out only to vanish again. Kyle's low growl rumbled in the quiet cabin. Nora slowed and whispered, "I see it too." They turned onto Birch Hollow Lane. At the end of the cul-de-sac stood Rachel's house. Once painted white, the siding had grayed and peeled, leaving bare wood exposed like wounds. The porch sagged under years of neglect. A rusted tricycle lay overturned in the yard, its front wheel bent like a broken limb. Nora parked at the curb and cut the engine. The sudden silence after the hum of the motor was jarring. She sat for a moment, gloved hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house. Her pulse quickened. Kyle shifted, ears forward, waiting. "Home," Nora whispered, though the word felt foreign. She opened the door. Rain greeted her immediately, cold needles against her skin. Gravel crunched under her boots as she stepped onto the street. Kyle leapt down after her, landing with a soldier's precision, his muscles taut beneath his scarred coat. He shook himself once, droplets flying, then fell into step at her side. The walk up the path was slow. Each footfall seemed to echo louder than it should have in the heavy air. Nora's breath fogged, mixing with the rain. Her duffel bag weighed heavy on her shoulder, filled with clothes, files, and the fragments of a life she was trying to piece back together. She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. For a moment she closed her eyes, listening. The house was quiet, but the kind of quiet that wasn't peace. It was the hush of something hidden, waiting. Kyle's growl was soft but insistent. His nose lifted toward the door, hackles prickling. Nora placed a steadying hand on his back. His fur was damp beneath her palm, but the strength beneath it reassured her. "Easy, boy," she murmured, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to calm, him or herself. She climbed the steps, the wood groaning under her weight. Rain dripped steadily from the porch roof, pooling in dark circles on the warped boards. She lifted her hand, hesitated, then knocked 3 times. The sound carried through the rain, dull and hollow. Behind her, Kyle stood rigid, every line of his body tense. His amber eyes locked on the door, unblinking, as though he could already sense what waited inside. Nora took another breath, shoulders squared, and whispered under her breath, like a prayer she hadn't spoken in years. "Let them be safe." The door opened slowly, hinges complaining in the damp air. Rachel Monroe stood framed in the doorway, her auburn hair tied back in a careless knot. She looked thinner than Nora remembered, her cardigan hanging loosely on her shoulders, green eyes dulled as though the years had sanded them down. Once, Rachel had been a steady presence in this house. Nora's sister Sarah had trusted her. That trust had been Nora's anchor during deployments. Now, staring at her, the comfort was gone. "Nora," Rachel said, voice faltering, "you're back." Nora gave a curt nod. Rainwater slid down her jacket, dripping onto the porch. Kyle pressed closer to her leg, his nose twitching, nostrils flaring as if reading the air behind Rachel. "May I come in?" Nora asked. Rachel hesitated for a heartbeat too long, then stepped aside. Of course. Inside, the house smelled of bleach layered over something sour, something that clung to the back of the throat. The curtains were drawn, muting the grey daylight, leaving the living room dim. Nora's eyes adjusted quickly, trained by years of moving through low-light spaces. The furniture was the same as it had been when Sarah was alive. The corduroy couch, sagging in the middle, the old mantel lined with photographs. But the warmth was gone. It was as though the house had been stripped of its soul. "You must be tired," Rachel said, fussing with her sleeve. "The girls are in the back, still in their pajamas." "I'll see them," Nora answered, already moving past. Rachel's voice rose behind her, uncertain. "They've been quiet, more than usual." Nora didn't respond. Kyle followed at her heel, his claws clicking lightly against the floorboards. Down the narrow hallway, the air grew heavier, carrying a faint chemical tang. The boards creaked under her weight, as if resenting every step. When she reached the last door, she heard it. A soft scratching, fabric against wood, the almost imperceptible sound of children trying to stay busy in silence. She pushed the door open gently. The sight froze her. Clara and Elise sat cross-legged on the floorboards, in oversized nightgowns that nearly swallowed their thin frames. Their blonde hair hung tangled, one braid half undone, the other's strands knotted into a small nest at the crown of her head. They were brushing dust into a tiny pile with their hands, as though that small act gave structure to their morning. For a long moment, they didn't see her. Nora's breath hitched. God, they're so thin. Their wrists looked bird-like, skin pale against the dim light, and then, her stomach clenched, faint red marks tracked across their forearms. Not scratches, not bites, lines too neat, too patterned. Clara, Elise. Her voice was soft, cracking at the edges. They froze. The pile of dust scattered under Elise's trembling hand. Clara turned first, her eyes grey like storm clouds, wide and unblinking. Elise followed slower, her darker eyes wary, almost suspicious. Nora knelt, ignoring the ache in her knees. "It's me, Mommy." She opened her arms, waiting for the rush forward, the clumsy hug, the squeals of recognition. It didn't come. The silence between them was so complete she could hear the rain outside, the steady tick of drops against the window pane. Her throat burned. Kyle stepped forward, breaking the standoff. He whined softly, tail low, but wagging once, carefully. His amber eyes locked on Clara's, then Elise's, offering something wordless. It worked. Clara blinked, her lip trembling, and then she launched forward, not to Nora, but to Kyle. She threw her arms around his thick neck, burying her face into his fur. Elise followed, pressing her cheek against Kyle's flank, her small hands clutching fistfuls of fur, as if afraid he might vanish. Kyle stood utterly still, the way only a seasoned canine could. He lowered his head, nudging each girl gently, a silent reassurance. "I am here. You're safe with me." Nora's chest tightened until it hurt. She reached forward, her hand brushing Clara's arm. That was when she saw it clearly. The raised, peeling lines, angry red against fragile skin. Her breath caught. "Sweetheart, what happened to you?" Clara pulled back immediately, tucking her hands behind her, eyes darting toward the bed. Elise clung tighter to Kyle, her voice no louder than a breath. "It whispers under my pillow." Nora froze. "What whispers?" The little girl didn't answer. She pressed her face deeper into Kyle's fur, as if the shepherd could shield her from the question. Kyle's growl rumbled low, his body stiffening, gaze fixed toward the bed. His tail went rigid, ears snapping forward. Nora followed his stare, heart pounding. Behind her, Rachel's voice floated weakly down the hallway. "They've had A rash, maybe detergent. Nothing serious. Nora's jaw clenched. She didn't look back. Her eyes remained on the girls, on the way they clung to Kyle, as though the shepherd were the only solid ground left in their world. She reached out again, gentler this time, brushing a strand of tangled hair from Clara's face. "It's all right," she whispered. "I'm here now." The words felt fragile, as if they might break under their own weight. Outside, the rain struck harder against the glass. Inside, the silence deepened, thick and uneasy. For the first time in all her years of deployments, Nora felt something colder than fear settle into her bones. It wasn't war. It wasn't the memory of deserts or gunfire. It was the knowledge that her daughters had been living in a battlefield she hadn't seen, a war waged in whispers and shadows, and she was already late to the fight. Kyle nudged Clara toward her, then Elise, as if insisting on the reunion. Nora gathered them gently into her arms, her tears slipping silently into their tangled hair. In that moment, she made a vow, not as a soldier, not as a captain, but as a mother. Whatever this is, it ends now. The moment Elise whispered her words, the room changed. Kyle stiffened, every muscle along his back tightening like a drawn bowstring. His ears pricked forward, nose flaring. The low growl that rolled from his chest wasn't meant to threaten. It was the sound of a soldier alerting the squad, the primal note that said, "Danger is here." Nora felt it too, a cold ripple sliding down her spine. She had learned, over the years in combat, to trust Kyle's instincts even more than her own. He had dragged her from burning Humvees, sensed IEDs buried under sand, once pulled her back just as sniper fire cut the air where her head had been. If Kyle growled, there was a reason. He padded forward, slow, deliberate, nose low to the floor. Clara and Elise clung together, watching with wide eyes. Kyle's tail stiffened as he reached the edge of their small bed, a plain wooden frame with a faded quilt. He circled once, nose pressing to the mattress seam, then began to scratch. Not frantically, methodically, as though digging out something hidden. Nora rose to her feet, pulse hammering. "What is it, boy?" she murmured. The dog's growl deepened. He pressed his paw hard against the pillow, nails catching fabric, then stepped back and looked at her. His amber eyes flickered with urgency, a silent command. "See for yourself." Nora hesitated. The girls huddled closer together, Elise's hand gripping Clara's wrist. "Don't," Clara whispered, almost too soft to hear. "It doesn't like the light." Her words stabbed into Nora's chest. She swallowed, forcing calm into her voice. "It's all right. Mommy's here." With gloved hands, she reached down and lifted the pillow. At first, she thought the dim lamplight was playing tricks. Then the truth came into focus. Tiny shapes squirmed against the sheets, dozens of them, no bigger than rice grains. They glistened wetly, their bodies translucent but pulsing with faint red light, as if each contained a drop of fire. They moved in an uncanny rhythm, not random like insects, but together, waves rising and falling, as if responding to some unseen signal. Nora's breath caught. She had seen parasites overseas, watched swarms in desert heat, but nothing like this. These things seemed engineered, unnatural. Kyle snarled, stepping closer, body low, protective between the creatures and the children. "Jesus," Nora whispered, pulling the pillow fully away. Beneath the writhing mass, something metallic glinted. And she grabbed her phone, flicked on the flashlight, and leaned closer. A syringe, small, clear, the kind used for precise injections. Its barrel caught the light, a trace of red liquid still clinging to the inside.
Her stomach turned, the red marks on her daughter's arms, the fatigue in their eyes, the whispers. This wasn't a detergent rash. This wasn't a child's bad dream. It was deliberate. She snatched the syringe, careful not to touch the tip, and wrapped it quickly in a handkerchief. Her military training surged to the surface. Contain evidence. Don't contaminate. The creatures writhed more violently under the beam of her flashlight, their faint glow intensifying as if agitated by exposure. Clara whimpered, burying her face into Elise's shoulder. Elise whispered again, barely audible. It whispers when we sleep. It tells us to be still. Nora felt the ground shift beneath her. She had walked through minefields, heard the shriek of mortars overhead, but nothing chilled her blood like hearing those words from her child's mouth. Kyle stepped closer to the bed, baring his teeth. His body blocked the twins completely, shielding them, his head lowered, ears flat, the posture of a dog ready to fight something he couldn't fully see. Nora quickly pulled the sheet back over the nest, forcing her hands to stay steady. She tucked the pillow back in place, concealing the glowing parasites from sight, though the memory burned in her mind. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Rachel's voice floated from the hallway, casual, almost dismissive. They've had some skin irritation, probably from new detergent. Kids scratch until they bleed if you don't stop them. Nora turned her head slowly, rage simmering beneath her calm expression. This isn't detergent. Rachel lingered in the doorway, her arms folded. Her eyes flickered to the bed, then back to Nora, but she said nothing. Nora's voice dropped to steel. I'll be staying with them. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it again. A long silence stretched before she gave a small shrug, stepping back into the shadows of the hall. Nora exhaled, steadying herself. She turned to her daughters, who still clung to Kale, their small hands tangled in his fur. She knelt, pulling them close. Listen to me. You're safe tonight. Kale and I are here. Nothing is going to hurt you again. Clara's eyes searched hers as if weighing the promise. Elise whispered something into Kyle's ear, and the shepherd lowered his head, pressing his muzzle gently against her cheek, a silent vow of protection. Nora rose again, tucking the syringe into her pocket, her mind already moving through procedures. Evidence collection, chain of custody, secure transmission. But this wasn't a battlefield she knew. These weren't insurgents or enemy lines. This was inside her own family, her own home. She stared at the bed one last time. The faint glow still leaked through the sheet, red as embers smoldering beneath ash. Her voice was low, almost a growl of her own. This wasn't an accident. Someone did this to them. Kale's eyes met hers in the dim light, steady and unblinking. He didn't need words to confirm what she already knew. The war had followed her home, and tonight was only the beginning. The house had settled into an uneasy silence. Rain tapped faintly at the window panes, and the wind moved through the pines outside like a restless choir. Inside, Nora sat rigid in the wooden chair by her daughter's bed, her mind racing, pulse steady, only because years of training had taught her how to keep it so. Clara and Elise were curled beneath the quilt, their small bodies pressed against Kyle's side. He lay stretched out along the bed, chest rising in slow, patient rhythm, his amber eyes half-lidded but watchful. Every so often, his ears flicked toward the door, then back to the girls, as if calculating which mattered more. He chose them every time. Nora couldn't shake the image of those glowing things writhing beneath the pillow, or the syringe with its trace of red. The logical part of her mind screamed for evidence. If you can't prove it, you can't stop it. That was rule one in the field. Quietly, she set her duffel on the floor and unzipped it. Inside, tucked between fatigues and notebooks, was a small, battered tin.
She flipped it open with careful fingers. Nestled inside were the tools she had carried through multiple deployments. A pinhole camera no larger than a button, adhesive patches, a tiny transmitter. Military issue, reliable, invisible to an untrained eye. She glanced at the twins. Clara's hand was twisted tightly in Kael's rough, knuckles pale. Even in sleep, or something like sleep, her grip did not loosen. Elise's face was pressed against the shepherd's flank, lips moving faintly in a whisper only the dog could hear. Kael shifted once, lowering his head until his muzzle brushed her hair, and she stilled. Nora's throat ached. They trusted Kael more than they trusted her. And maybe, she thought bitterly, they were right. He had been here for them in ways she hadn't. She shook off the thought. There was no time for guilt. Not tonight. She moved with precision, crouching by the bookshelf in the corner. The small device clicked softly as she armed it, then adhered it into the shadow between two shelves of untouched toys. From there, it had a clear view of the bed, the door, the window. She tested the feed on her phone, grainy but steady, the kind of image that could make or break a case. Her breath left her in a quiet sigh. Step 1. Done. She rose and padded silently to the opposite corner, where the closet door hung slightly ajar. Another camera, tucked just above the frame. This one angled across the room, catching any movement that might slip past the first. She adjusted until Kael's watchful eyes filled the screen. The twins curled against him like fledglings under a wing. The sight twisted something deep inside her. In her memory, Clara had been a whirlwind of chatter. Elise, quieter, but always laughing at her sister's antics. They had once fought over who got to braid Mommy's hair, their voices filling the house with ordinary chaos. Now, they lay silent, clinging to a dog, as if silence itself might protect them. Nora pressed a hand against her sternum, steadying the storm inside. You did this. You left them here. Kael's gaze slid to her, sharp and unblinking, as if he had heard the thought. His tail thumped once against the quilt, then stilled, a reassurance, or a warning not to falter. Nora finished her work, placing the last camera near the baseboard. Each device fed to her phone in real time, a network invisible to anyone but her. She checked the battery, the signal strength, solid. She would know if anyone stepped into this room again. Behind her, Clara stirred. Her small eyes blinked open, glassy in the dim lamplight. She didn't look at Nora. She looked at Kael, whispering hoarsely, "Don't leave." Kael shifted, pressing his head into her hand. Only then did Clara's eyes close again. Nora's composure cracked. She sank to her knees beside the bed, brushing a stray lock of hair from her daughter's forehead. Clara didn't stir, but Nora saw the faint shadow of red marks beneath her sleeve. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry." Kael turned his head, resting his chin across Clara's stomach, eyes never leaving Nora's face. He seemed to say what Nora could not. She doesn't need your words. She needs your fight. Nora wiped at her eyes quickly, angry at herself for letting them blur. She stood, pacing once to the door, then back again. The house was too quiet. Rachel hadn't returned since her strange comment in the hallway. That absence screamed louder than presence. Nora checked the lock, then slid a chair beneath the handle. Years of deployments had drilled into her the value of redundancy. One measure of security was never enough. She returned to the bed. Kael had settled fully now, his head low, ears twitching at every shift in the air. Clara's hand still clung to his fur, even in sleep. Elise's foot rested against his flank. He was their shield, and she was supposed to be their mother.
The anger that burned in her chest was colder than any rage she had felt overseas. Out there, the enemy was clear. Here, it was hidden, crawling under pillows, whispering into children's ears. Nora sat back in the chair, phone in her hand, eyes fixed on the live feed. The screens showed her the same view she saw with her own eyes. Her daughters, asleep but restless. Kyle watching like a sentinel carved from stone. She leaned closer, whispering, not to the girls, not even to herself, but to the dog. "Keep them safe tonight." Kyle's ears flicked. His tail moved once, the faintest thump against the quilt. The feed glowed softly in Nora's palm, a reminder that now she was watching. Whatever moved in this house would no longer do so unseen. But as she settled into the long night, listening to the rain fade and the silence grow heavier, she knew the cameras were not the real defense. The real defense was lying between her daughters, breathing slow and steady, waiting for the enemy to come. And for the first time since she had returned to Ashwood Pines, Nora felt the battlefield around her sharpen into focus. This was war, and she was finally home to fight it. The house held its breath that night. Outside, the storm had moved on, leaving the air thick with damp pine and the occasional groan of water slipping from branches. The moon hid behind low clouds, casting Ashwood Pines in a suffocating darkness. Inside the girls' bedroom, only the faint glow of the nightlight painted the walls in pale amber. Clara and Elise lay tangled in sleep, pressed tightly against Kyle's broad frame. The shepherd had not moved in hours. His ears twitched, his chest lifted in steady rhythm, but his eyes remained half open, pupils dilated, scanning shadows that shifted with every flicker of light. Nora sat in the hallway chair, her phone balanced in her palm, the live feed from the hidden cameras pulsing faintly against her skin. She had checked every lock, reinforced every window, double-checked her weapon resting on the side table. Still, unease gnawed at her ribs. It wasn't the kind of fear she had felt in combat, where death could explode from a roadside at any second. This was quieter, heavier, the fear of something unnatural, slipping into the safe spaces of children. The feed stayed still for hours. Clara shifted once, murmuring in her sleep. Elise rolled to her side, fingers still tangled in Cale's fur. The shepherd's head tilted, nose twitching, then returned to stillness. Nora's own eyes grew heavy, exhaustion pressing from behind her skull. She pinched herself awake, reminding her body that this was not a night for rest. Then, at 2:14 a.m., the feed shifted. Nora blinked hard, leaning forward. At first it was only movement at the edge of the frame, the faint outline of the bedroom door, opening by degrees. No creak, no groan. Too careful, too practiced. Her breath froze in her chest. Through the grainy black and white feed, a silhouette entered. Male. Broad-shouldered, but moving with a slowness that suggested training, not hesitation. He didn't turn on a light. He didn't stumble. He moved as if he already knew where the bed was, where the pillow lay, where the girls slept. Nora's fingers tightened around the phone until her knuckles whitened. Cale stirred, his head lifting from the quilt, his body stiffened, but he didn't bark. Not yet. The figure knelt beside Clara's side of the bed. Nora's heart slammed against her ribs. The silhouette reached beneath the pillow, his hand steady, precise. Something metallic glinted briefly in the faint nightlight glow. A syringe. The girls didn't stir. Clara's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, her face turned toward Kyle's flank. Elise murmured in her sleep, turning slightly, but did not wake. The figure leaned closer. Nora could see the motion, deliberate and clinical, the practiced angle of someone who had done this before. He lifted Clara's arm, gently, almost tenderly, like a nurse with a patient. Then the needle pressed to the skin. Nora's stomach lurched. No. The word escaped her lips, barely audible, swallowed by the silence. Cale growled then, low and dangerous, his amber eyes catching the faint light. The intruder froze for half a heartbeat, then finished the injection in one smooth press. He withdrew the syringe, wiped the skin with a small cloth, then slipped the object back beneath the pillow. Every movement was careful, clinical. He was not afraid. He was efficient. Nora's nails dug into her palm. Her body screamed to move, to storm into the room, to tear him away from her daughter with her bare hands. But her training pinned her to the chair. If she acted now, she would only have her eyes and rage. If she waited, she would have proof. On the feed, the figure lingered a moment longer. His head turned slightly, though his face remained in shadow. Nora leaned closer, willing the camera to sharpen, to give her one clear glimpse. But the intruder had angled himself perfectly, avoiding exposure, as though he knew the limits of surveillance. Cale bared his teeth, the rumble in his chest vibrating through the mattress. Clara stirred faintly, whispering something in her sleep, but did not wake. The figure straightened, rose to his feet. He moved back toward the door, silent as a shadow. Within seconds, he was gone. The door eased shut behind him. Nora sat frozen, the phone trembling in her hand. Her heart thundered so loud, she was certain it would wake the girls. For a long moment, the feed showed only the quiet rise and fall of her daughter's breaths, the steady watch of Cale, his gaze locked on the door, as if daring it to open again. Her chest heaved once, then steadied. She replayed the footage, frame by frame, her thumb trembling on the screen. Each time it showed the same nightmare, the faceless man, the syringe, the injection. She lowered the phone, pressing it hard against her thigh. This was no dream, no child's fevered imagination. This was deliberate, clinical. A predator entering her daughter's room under cover of night. Cale's eyes flicked to her from the feed, as if sensing her despair through the lens. His tail tapped once against the quilt, a reminder. Nora whispered into the silence, voice raw, cracked from fury. "I won't let them touch you again." The video played again, and again. Nora sat rigid in the hallway chair, her phone balanced on her thigh, the screen painting her face with ghostly light. Every frame felt like a blow, the faceless intruder, the careful hands, the syringe sinking into Clara's arm. She pinched the screen to zoom in, replayed the moment the figure glanced toward the camera, and cursed under her breath when the image resolved into nothing more than a shadow turned deliberately away. Her chest felt tight, her pulse hammering in her ears. She had watched hours of combat footage in her career, grainy clips of convoys attacked, drone feeds capturing insurgents moving across sand. But this was different. This wasn't a war zone halfway across the world. This was her daughter's room. Their safety violated in silence, while she sat just a few feet away. The fury that welled inside her was so sharp, it burned. Through the open door she could see them. Clara and Elise lay curled in sleep, oblivious to what had just been done to them. Their small hands rested in Cale's fur, fingers clenched tight, even in dreams. The shepherd had not moved since the intruder left. He remained a dark statue at the foot of the bed, ears pricked forward, amber eyes locked on the door, chest rising in slow, deliberate rhythm. He looked like a sentinel carved from the earth itself, watching, waiting, holding back only because she had. Nora forced herself to breathe. She scrolled backward on the feed, scanning each frame with the precision of a soldier, cataloging evidence. The man had known exactly where the cameras wouldn't see. He had kept his head tilted, his body angled. He had rehearsed this. Her stomach clenched. This isn't random. This is orchestrated. Her thumb hesitated over the screen, hovering above the share icon. She could send this footage to military contacts, to law enforcement. But a bitter truth settled over her. It wouldn't be enough. A grainy figure without a face, without a name. Bureaucrats would dismiss it as paranoia, as a mother projecting her fear onto shadows. She clenched her jaw. Not this time. Not with my girls. Her gaze shifted back to the room. The lamplight caught the faint marks on Clara's arm where the injection had been delivered. The sight hollowed her chest. Her child, marked like a specimen. Her baby used to be less than human. Kyle's head lifted, eyes meeting hers across the room. His gaze was steady, unflinching. It carried none of the rage that burned in her. Only patience, resolve, the kind of faith that had pulled her through deserts and firefights. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside had gone quiet, leaving the house steeped in heavy silence. Finally, Nora leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her voice breaking the air in a whisper meant for him alone. "I won't let them touch you again." Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out, steady, deliberate. "Not them. Not ever." Kyle's tail shifted once against the quilt, a faint thump, as if acknowledging her vow. Nora wiped at her face with the back of her hand, realizing only then that her vision had blurred. Tears had slipped down her cheeks without permission. She hated that, hated showing weakness when strength was demanded. But this wasn't the battlefield she knew. This was worse. Her daughters stirred faintly, murmuring in their sleep. Elise whispered something inaudible, and Kyle lowered his head, brushing his muzzle against her arm until she stilled. Nora watched, her chest aching. The dog was their shield, their anchor. And she, God help her, had left them vulnerable for too long. Her mind raced with plans. Evidence needed to be collected properly. Samples from the pillow. The syringe hidden in her pocket needed to be preserved, logged. She thought of chain of custody forms, of sterile bags, of procedures drilled into her from years of handling classified intelligence. She would follow them to the letter, because she knew she couldn't afford a single mistake. But another voice cut through the precision of her training, the raw voice of a mother. What if they come back tomorrow? What if the next dose is the one that breaks them? Her hands trembled once, then steadied. She opened the phone again, reviewing the footage one more time. The figure knelt, injected, left. A ghost that knew the layout of her home, the rhythms of her daughter's sleep. A ghost who had practiced cruelty long enough to make it look routine. She exhaled slowly. This wasn't just medical abuse. This was a ritual. Deliberate, controlled. And it had a purpose. Nora rose from the chair, stepping into the room. Kyle's gaze followed her, but he didn't move, as if unwilling to leave his post. She brushed her fingers lightly over the quilt, over Clara's hair, Elise's shoulder. They didn't stir. She stood at the foot of the bed, looking down at all three of them, the twins, fragile and unaware, and Kyle, steadfast and unyielding. Something shifted inside her then, something deeper than rage, heavier than fear, resolve. It filled her bones, hot and unshakable. The intruder had left no words, but his message had been clear. They belong to us. Her answer would be just as clear.
Not while I breathe. She stepped back, sinking into the hallway chair once more, phone still glowing in her palm. The screen showed the live feed, Kyle, the twins, the door. She would watch every second. She would not blink. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, whispering against the house like a warning. Inside, Nora sat in silence, her fury coiled tight as a blade unsheathed, waiting for its moment. And when it came, she would not hesitate. The morning broke grey, filtered through clouds that never seemed to move. Ashwood Pines looked the same as it had the night before, quiet, withdrawn. But to Nora, nothing about it felt familiar anymore. Rachel's house creaked awake around her, the old wood groaning with each gust of wind. From the kitchen came the faint hiss of a kettle, then the hollow clink of ceramic mugs. Rachel's rhythm, calm and ordinary, a sound that should have soothed. Instead, it made Nora's skin crawl. The twins were still asleep upstairs, cocooned in Kyle's watchful presence. He had not left their side once, his body stretched across the bed like a living barricade. Nora had kissed both their foreheads before slipping away, her heart aching at how deeply they slept, as though exhaustion itself had taken them hostage. Now she stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door to Rachel's study. The air here was different. It smelled faintly sterile, sharp, the way military hospitals smelled after too much bleach. Beneath it lingered something acrid, chemical, as though spilled solvents had seeped into the grain of the floorboards. Nora pressed her hand against the door, then turned the handle. It gave way without resistance. The study was small, tucked at the back of the house where sunlight barely reached. Heavy curtains sealed most of the light out, leaving the air thick and dim. A desk sat centered beneath the window, its surface wiped too clean. No scattered papers, no personal clutter, just neatness, intentional neatness. Nora stepped inside, boots whispering against the worn rug. Her eyes traced the bookshelves, lined with reference texts, binders with blank spines, notebooks stacked in careful order. It was the kind of space designed to look mundane, to give the impression of control. But control was its own kind of red flag. She knelt by the desk, tugging at the drawers. The top slid open easily. Pens, paper clips, a few envelopes. The second was the same, neat, ordinary, nothing to catch the eye. But the third, her fingers curled around the handle, tugged, and met resistance. Locked. Her pulse quickened. She tugged again, harder, but the drawer refused to move. Nora sat back on her heels, staring at the locked drawer. Her mind flickered through memory. Rachel reading to Clara and Elise on the couch. Rachel kneeling to tie shoelaces. Rachel's smile when she promised, "I'll take care of them while you're gone." Once, those memories had steadied her during deployment. Now they twisted like knives. "Did I misjudge you?" she thought bitterly. "Or did you change after Sarah was gone?" She rose, moving to the shelves. The acrid scent was stronger here, seeping from somewhere she couldn't see. She ran her fingers along the spines, pausing when one binder didn't sit flush. She tugged. It came free with effort, heavier than it should have been. She flipped it open, empty pages, but the faint outline of something pressed into them, as though sheets had once been filled and torn out hastily. Her jaw tightened. She placed the binder back, then crouched low. On the baseboard beneath the desk, faint smudges streaked the paint, dark fingerprints, almost invisible in the dim light. Someone had pulled something out of here often enough to leave a trace. She stood again, staring at the locked drawer. Her fingers itched to break it open, to force the truth into the light. But the girls were upstairs. Kyle would hear if she made noise, Rachel too. Timing mattered. She exhaled, slow and steady, then reached into her pocket. Her fingers brushed against the wrapped syringe she had taken from the twins' room. The evidence weighed heavier than steel. She already had enough to prove something sinister was happening here, but proof wasn't the same as answers. Her chest ached with conflict. Rachel had once been family. Sarah had loved her, trusted her. After the accident, when Sarah's life was stolen in twisted metal on an icy road, Rachel had stepped in. She had carried the weight Nora couldn't carry while deployed. She had put food on the table, tucked the girls into bed, braided their hair. And now, here Nora was, suspecting her of betrayal. What if I'm wrong? The thought came, unbidden. What if grief has twisted my judgment? But then she saw Clara's thin wrist, Elise's whispered fear. It whispers under my pillow. No, she wasn't wrong. The anger came fast, hot and blinding, but she swallowed it down. Anger was noise, and noise wouldn't save her daughters. Instead, she slipped a small tool from her pocket, a thin strip of metal she had carried for years. Improvised field key. She crouched by the drawer and slid it in, careful, patient. The lock clicked faintly, loosening beneath her practiced touch. But before she could pull it open, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Nora froze. Rachel's voice carried, light and casual. "Nora, coffee's ready." Her pulse spiked. She slid the strip back into her pocket and rose swiftly, moving to the shelf as though she'd been browsing books all along. When the door opened, Rachel stood in the frame, mug in hand, a polite smile fixed on her lips. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone breezy, but her eyes too sharp. Nora forced a smile of her own. "Just looking. It's been a long time since I've been in this room." Rachel's gaze flicked to the desk, then back to Nora. "Not much to see. Just bills and boring paperwork." She laughed lightly, sipping her coffee. The chemical tang still lingered in the air. Nora inhaled deliberately, letting her eyes meet Rachel's. "Smells strong in here." "Cleaning supplies?" Rachel's smile didn't waver. "Bleach. You know me, paranoid about germs." Nora nodded, though the knot in her gut twisted tighter. Rachel lingered a moment longer, then said, "Girls are still asleep. That's good. They've been restless lately." "Yeah," Nora answered softly. "Restless." When Rachel finally turned and left, Nora exhaled slowly, her hand brushing the locked drawer once more. She would open it. Not now, not yet, but soon. And when she did, the truth Rachel had tried to hide would have nowhere left to run. The rain had thinned to a mist by the time Nora stepped outside. The morning air clung damp against her skin, cool and heavy, with the resinous scent of pine. Ashwood pines lay hushed around her, its streets empty. The few curtains she passed shifting closed as if her presence was an intrusion. Kael walked at her side, his steps measured, ears twitching at every small sound. The rattle of a loose gutter, the distant bark of a dog 2 blocks over. The twins had stayed behind, curled in blankets with strict instructions not to leave Kael's sight. Part of Nora hated leaving them even for a moment, but another part knew she needed answers that wouldn't be found inside the suffocating walls of Rachel's house. The neighborhood looked the same as it had when she was a child. Cracked sidewalks, sagging porches, the old street lamps that flickered even in daylight. But there was a strange quiet here, a watchful quality that set her teeth on edge. She had seen it in combat towns, villages that knew something but wouldn't say, communities silenced by fear or loyalty. It was Mrs. Levette who finally broke the silence. The old woman was bent over her chameleon bushes, a metal watering can in her hand. Her silver hair frizzed around the brim of her sun hat, and her wiry frame looked too small against the sprawling hedge she tended. She had been there since Nora was a girl, always in the yard, always with her plants. When she spotted Nora, she straightened slowly, eyes narrowing with recognition. "Well," she said, her voice a rasp softened by age. "Look who's come back to the Pines." Nora forced a polite smile. "Mrs. Levet. It's been a long time." "Too long," the woman replied. Her gaze drifted down to Kyle, who stood still as stone, amber eyes fixed on her. "And you've brought yourself a soldier." "Kyle," Nora said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "He served with me overseas." Mrs. Levet hummed, then set the watering can down. Her hands were thin, veined but steady. "Your girls, they're with Rachel, aren't they?" Nora stiffened. "Yes, they are." The old woman's mouth pressed into a thin line. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They've been quiet. Too quiet. I hardly seen them outside for weeks. Not like children, you know. Not like children should be." Nora's chest tightened. She said nothing, waiting. Mrs. Levet's eyes shifted toward Rachel's house, then back. "She's been keeping odd hours, that one. Out in the yard before dawn, bringing in packages, big ones. Always signs for them herself. Never let the delivery men step past the porch. Carries them straight inside, like they're made of gold." Nora's fingers curled against Kyle's fur. "Packages?" The old woman nodded. "Marked with no company names. Plain cardboard, always sealed tight. And she never puts them in the trash. Not once. I'd know." Her voice softened, conspiratorial. "Something's off, Captain. Been off for months." The title startled Nora, but she didn't correct it. Instead, she studied the woman's face, the way her green eyes darted nervously toward Rachel's curtains. Mrs. Levet wasn't given to gossip without cause. She was the kind who watched, remembered, collected details like others collected stamps. Kyle gave a low rumble, his gaze following the line of her eyes to the front of the house. Nora tightened her grip on his harness. "Did anyone else notice?" The woman shook her head slowly. "This town doesn't notice what it doesn't want to. Rachel's always been polite, quiet, and paid her bills. Folks respect that. But me..." She trailed off, her mouth pressing tight. "Plants tell me when something's rotten at the roots. And that house, Nora, it smells like rot." Nora felt the weight of the syringe in her pocket, wrapped carefully in cloth, and thought of the glowing things under her daughter's pillow. The rot wasn't in the roots. It was already inside the house. She forced her voice to calm. "Thank you, Mrs. Levet. I appreciate you telling me." The old woman gave her a long look, as though measuring whether Nora was strong enough to carry what she'd just given her. Then she bent back to her plants, her voice rasping low. "Protect those girls. Whatever Rachel's mixed up in. It's not for children." Nora turned away, her chest burning. The street seemed narrower now, the houses leaning inward, the trees whispering secrets she couldn't hear. She walked back toward Rachel's with Kyle at her side, his muscles taut, ears angled forward. Every step she took, the questions multiplied. What was Rachel bringing into the house? Why only at dawn? Why keep the girls isolated? Why hide behind bleach and locked drawers? Her daughter's voices echoed in her mind. Elise's whisper. "It whispers under my pillow." Clara's trembling silence. Kyle gave another low growl as they neared the porch. Nora followed his gaze. For a moment she thought she saw the curtain shift, the briefest flicker of movement, someone watching from inside. Then it stilled. Nora exhaled, steadying herself.
She had lived her life by the code of evidence, orders, chain of command. But this was different. This was personal. And every instinct she had told her the enemy was already inside. She rested her hand on Kael's harness, whispering so softly only he could hear. "We'll find out. Whatever she's hiding, we'll find it." Kael's tail tapped once against her leg, a soldier's acknowledgement. And as Nora stepped back into the dim, chemical-scented house, the warning of Mrs. Levette settled in her chest like a stone. The war had moved closer. The house was quiet after sunset, the kind of silence that felt too heavy, too rehearsed. Upstairs, Clara and Elise had finally drifted into uneasy sleep. Kael stretched across their door like a sentry who would rather die than move. Nora moved through the hallway barefoot, each step measured, her body tuned to silence the way it had been in hostile territory. Every creak of the floor sounded like a shot in her ears, though no one stirred. Rachel's door remained closed at the far end of the hall, her shadow absent, the faintest thread of light leaking beneath the frame. Now was her chance. She slipped into the study, the air inside stale with that familiar undercurrent of chemicals. The curtains remained drawn, the desk pristine, the locked drawer mocking her. Nora crouched, sliding the thin strip of metal into the keyhole again. A careful twist, pressure at the right angle, until finally the lock gave with a muted click. Her pulse quickened. She pulled the drawer open. At first glance, it seemed empty, a shallow layer of folders, all neatly stacked. She pulled them out, setting them silently on the desk. Beneath them sat a small black case, no larger than a shoebox. Her fingers hovered over it, breath caught in her throat. She had seen cases like this before, in field hospitals, in makeshift labs cobbled together in desert outposts, always locked. Always containing something that never belonged in civilian hands. The latch was easily beneath her fingers. Inside, arranged in tight rows of foam padding, were vials. Clear glass, each capped with rubber stoppers. Red liquid glistened within them, the faintest shimmer catching the lamplight. Blood. Nora's heart stopped. She leaned closer. Labels, printed neatly in sterile block letters. Clara Vance. Sample. 03. Elise Vance. Sample. 05. Her stomach lurched violently, bile pressing at the back of her throat. Her daughters' names, reduced to specimens. Their lives are catalogued as experiments. Her hands trembled once, then stilled. She lifted one vial, turning it slowly between her fingers. The blood looked thicker than it should, faintly iridescent, as if carrying something unnatural, something added. She set it back carefully, forcing her breath steady. Her training screamed for her to bag the evidence, preserve it. But the mother in her wanted to smash every vial against the wall, watch them shatter, watch this nightmare leak into the rug where it could never be used again. Instead, she reached deeper. Beneath the foam padding, something shifted, a false bottom. Her pulse hammered as she pried it up. Beneath lay a bundle of documents, folded tight, bound with twine. The edges were yellowed, smudged with fingerprints. She untied it with shaking hands, spreading the pages across the desk. Her eyes skimmed the headers. Helix Core Laboratories, Clinical Trials, Log. Another sheet. Serum Variant Redline, Juvenile Compatibility Study. Her blood ran cold. Line after line, detailed subjects, ages, sample codes. Notes scribbled in the margins. Higher receptivity window, reduced immune resistance, sibling comparison, yields promising results. And there, the names again. Clara Vance, Elise Vance.
their initials stamped across charts as though they weren't children, but numbers in a grotesque equation. Nora pressed her hands against the desk, fighting the urge to collapse. Every deployment, every firefight, every loss, none of it had prepared her for this. Not her babies, not here. Her breath came ragged. How long has this been happening? How many nights? How many doses? The house groaned, wood shifting under the weight of time. Nora froze, listening. But no footsteps came. No voice called her name. The silence returned. Cale's growl floated faintly from upstairs, low but steady, a reminder of his vigilance. Nora shoved the documents into her bag, then the vials, one row at a time, careful not to clink the glass. She would take them to someone she trusted, someone outside this poisoned town. Her eyes fell on one final page, half crumpled at the bottom of the stack. She smoothed it flat with her palm. Project Helix Core, Phase 2 expansion. Target sites listed: Iron Hollow Ridge, River Point Annex. Not just here, not just her children. Her breath caught. This wasn't local. This was networked, organized, deliberate. She folded the page carefully, tucking it into the deepest pocket of her jacket. Evidence. Proof. The kind that could not be ignored. Her hand brushed the syringe still hidden there from the night before. Between the syringe, the vials, and the documents, she had the story in her grasp. The rot Mrs. Levette had whispered about. The nightmare her daughters had tried to explain. But proof alone would not save them. Not yet. She closed the drawer, relocking it, wiping her fingerprints from the handle. The room looked as untouched as before, but her bag now carried the weight of damnation. She paused at the door, eyes sweeping the study one last time. The smell of bleach lingered, but beneath it, she smelled truth now. Acrid and metallic, sharp as betrayal. Her throat tightened as she thought of Rachel, the woman who had once tucked her girls into bed, who had been trusted as family. And now, standing behind the curtain of secrets, Rachel was something else entirely. An accomplice, or worse. Nora whispered into the empty room, voice raw. "You won't bury them in your science. Not my girls." She slipped back into the hall, moving silently up the stairs. At the top, she found Kyle waiting, his amber eyes catching the faint light. He sniffed at her bag, then looked at her, tail stiff. Nora crouched, pressing her forehead against his for a brief second. "We've got the proof, boy. Now we find the rest of it." Kyle huffed softly, his breath warm against her skin. When Nora stepped into her daughter's room again, Clara stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed, and she whispered, "Mommy?" Nora knelt, brushing hair from her face. "I'm here, sweetheart." Elise shifted too, clutching Kale tighter. Nora's gaze swept over them, her heart aching. They didn't know the words Helix Core or Serum Trials. They didn't need to. All they knew was fear, whispers, and the dog, who never left their side. Nora tightened her grip on the bag. They would know something else now. They would know what it meant to be fought for. And when Helix Core came looking again, she would be ready. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, each second a hammer against Nora's chest. The house was asleep, or pretending to be. Clara and Elise were bundled in their beds upstairs, their breathing uneven, restless even in dreams. Kyle lay curled at the threshold like a dark sentinel, his head lifting whenever the floor shifted or the pipes groaned. Nora sat at the kitchen table, the evidence spread before her like pieces of a crime scene. Vials wrapped in cloth, the syringe sealed in a zip bag,
documents stamped with Helix Core Laboratories. Her hands shook once, then stilled as she forced herself into discipline. She stared at her phone, thumb hovering above a single contact. General Adriana Cole. The name alone pressed memory against her ribs. A desert night in Kandahar. Gunfire shattering the silence. A Humvee overturned, flames clawing at the sky. Cole trapped beneath twisted metal, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Nora had gone back, against orders, against reason, dragging her CO free seconds before the vehicle exploded. Cole had gripped her hand then, her voice raw. "You never need me, Captain Vance. You call. Doesn't matter when. Doesn't matter why." That was 8 years ago. And tonight, Nora had no one else. Her throat tightened. She had faced insurgents, warlords, firefights that turned sand red. She had stood unflinching before death. But now, admitting her daughters had been violated, turned into experiments. It felt harder than any battlefield. She tapped the screen. The call rang twice before connecting. Cole. The voice was gravel, clipped, the same voice that had once commanded a battalion with nothing but tone. Nora swallowed. "General." "It's Vance." A pause, then softer. "Nora." "Jesus Christ. It's been years. You're alive, Captain?" "Barely," Nora said, her voice brittle. Cole chuckled once, but it died quickly. "You wouldn't be calling at this hour unless something's bleeding." "What is it?" Nora's grip tightened around the phone, the words caught in her throat, shame and fury warring inside her. Finally, she forced them out. "It's my daughters, Clara and Elise. They've been..." She faltered. "They've been made victims. Someone's experimenting on them." The silence on the other end was immediate, heavy. When Cole finally spoke, her voice was low, dangerous. "Explain." Nora pressed her palm flat on the table to ground herself. "I found vials of their blood, documents marked Helix Core. They're being injected with something, synthetic, engineered. I caught it on camera. A man came into their room at night, injected Clara like she was a specimen." Her voice cracked. "She's 8, Adriana. They both are." For a long moment, all Nora heard was her own ragged breathing. Then Cole's voice came, sharper now. "Do you have proof?" "Yes. Vials, syringe, logs. I have everything." "And you trust no one local?" Nora laughed bitterly. "Would you?" "No," Cole admitted. The sound of rustling papers carried faintly over the line, then the scrape of a chair. "Helix Core. They've been on our radar. Off-the-books contracts. Disappearing shipments. Nothing that stuck." A pause. "But your daughters." Her voice hardened. "That makes it personal." Nora closed her eyes. "I shouldn't have left them here. I thought Rachel was protecting them. I thought..." Her voice failed and she pressed her fist against her mouth to stop the sob rising in her chest. Cole didn't fill the silence with pity. She never had. Instead, her words landed like orders, steady, precise. "Listen to me, Vance. You're a soldier. You did what soldiers do. You trusted your team. Sometimes teams break. That's not on you. What matters now is what you do next." Nora forced a breath. "Then tell me what to do." Cole's tone shifted, steel under fire. "First, you hold the line. Keep those girls alive until I get there. Second, you send me everything you've got. Photos, scans, timestamps. I'll burn the signal after it's received. Third, don't confront Rachel yet. Not until we know who's holding her leash." Nora nodded, though Cole couldn't see it.
She was family once. She raised them when I couldn't. But now, I think she's part of this. Cole's voice dropped to a whisper, the kind that carried more threat than a shout. Then she'll answer for it. For the first time that night, Nora felt her spine straighten. She wasn't alone. She wasn't screaming into silence anymore. Still, her voice trembled when she asked, "Adriana, can you really help me? This isn't combat. These are children, my children." Cole's answer came like a promise carved into stone. "You saved my life, Captain. I don't forget debts. Hold on, Nora. I'm sending a team." Nora's throat burned. She bit down on the emotion threatening to spill, clenching her jaw until it steadied. "Thank you." "You don't thank me yet. You get those girls through the night. And when I arrive, we end this." The line clicked dead. Nora set the phone down slowly, staring at the spread of evidence. Her hands still shook, but not from fear, from resolve. Kyle padded into the kitchen then, silent as shadow. He pressed his muzzle against her arm, amber eyes steady, unblinking. Nora slid her hand into his fur, gripping tight. "She's sending help," Nora whispered, her voice breaking with equal parts relief and fury. "We're not alone anymore." Kael's tail thumped once against the floor. Nora drew the vials closer, wrapping them in cloth again, sealing the syringe. She worked methodically, soldier precise, because if she stopped, she'd crumble. And she couldn't crumble. Not tonight. Not while Clara and Elise slept upstairs with poison already in their veins. When the last item was packed, Nora leaned against the table, her eyes burning. She whispered into the dim kitchen, to the ghosts of Sarah, to the God she wasn't sure still listened. "Hold them for me. Just one more night." Kael's growl drifted low, vibrating against her arm. It wasn't a warning. It was an agreement. Nora lifted her head, wiped her face and squared her shoulders. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was a mother. And tonight, she had declared war. The house was holding its breath. Nora had just finished repacking the evidence when she heard it, a sound so small she might have missed it, if not for Kyle. A whimper from upstairs, sharp and thin, followed by the scrape of claws against wood as the shepherd bolted from the kitchen. Her body moved before thought. She sprinted up the staircase, her hand grazing the banister, her chest locking tight with dread. At the top of the stairs, the girl's door was ajar, and the air inside was different. Too warm, too heavy, as though the room itself were fevered. Kyle stood rigid at Elise's bedside, his body tense, a growl rolling from deep in his chest. His hackles bristled, and his gaze swept the empty corners of the room as if he could see what Nora could not. "Elise?" Nora's voice cracked as she rushed to the bed. The child was pale, her lips drained of color, her forehead slick with sweat that dampened her hair into fragile curls. Her small chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, each one trembling. Her eyes fluttered open halfway, irises dulled to glass, pupils swimming. "Mommy." Her voice was a whisper, paper thin. "Red dreams." Nora's heart slammed against her ribs. She brushed trembling fingers across her daughter's clammy skin, the heat radiating from her body unnatural, burning. "It's okay, baby. I'm here. Just breathe for me." But Elise shook her head weakly. "Can't. It's in me. It whispers." Nora swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady even as panic clawed at her. "No. Don't listen. You're stronger than them." Kyle edged closer, lowering his head until his muzzle brushed Elise's cheek. His growl softened into a whine. His amber eyes locked onto hers, as if urging her to stay. Elise's tiny fingers twitched, curling into his fur, and he did not move. Nora pressed the back of her hand against her daughter's throat, checking pulse the way she'd done 1,000 times for soldiers in the field. Too weak. Too slow. Her stomach clenched. She grabbed a clean towel, dipped it in the basin by the bed, and pressed it gently to Elise's forehead. The cloth darkened with heat almost instantly. "Hold on," she whispered. "Just hold on." Clara stirred in the other bed, sitting up groggily, her eyes wide when she saw her twin. "What's wrong with her?" "Go back to sleep, sweetheart," Nora said quickly, though her voice trembled. "She's just a little sick. Cale and I have her." Clara shook her head, clutching the blanket to her chin. Her gaze darted to the window, to the corners of the room. "It's here," she whispered. "It comes when she's weak." Kael's growl deepened, ears snapping forward, his body lowering into a guard stance. His gaze fixed on the shadowed corner near the dresser, teeth bared. Nora saw nothing, but the hair rose on her arms all the same. "Enough," she hissed, forcing control into her tone. "Nothing is taking her, not while I'm breathing." She scooped Elise into her arms, feeling the frightening weightlessness of her body. The child's head lolled against her shoulder, heat searing through her thin nightshirt. Elise's lips moved faintly, whispering words that chilled Nora's blood. "They said, it's only sleep. If I don't fight." Nora's breath caught. She clutched her tighter, rocking slightly. "No, baby. You fight. You keep fighting. You hear me?" Kael pressed close to her side, his flank brushing against her leg, anchoring her as much as guarding the child. His growl didn't fade. It vibrated steady and low, a warning to whatever lingered unseen. Nora laid Elise back down, adjusting the blankets, sliding the cool towel across her burning skin again and again. Her training screamed for action. IV fluids, blood tests, medical triage. But she had none of that here. All she had was the evidence in her bag, the promise Cole had made, and the fragile rhythm of her daughter's breath. Clara slipped out of bed, crossing the room barefoot, her nightgown trailing. She climbed onto the mattress beside her sister, wrapping an arm protectively across Elise's small chest, her eyes, wide and glassy, fixed on Nora. "You won't let them take her, will you?" Nora's throat ached. She shook her head firmly. "No, never." Kael circled once, then lay down with his head on Elise's legs, his body a barrier between the child and the door. His ears never stopped moving, his eyes never closed. Every sound outside, the groan of a tree, the shift of the roof, pulled a low rumble from his chest. Nora sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Elise's damp hair back, whispering words she barely believed herself. "You're safe. Kael's here. Mommy's here. No one's going to hurt you again." But in her chest, fury boiled. Proof or no proof, documents or no documents, her daughter was slipping away in front of her eyes, and she could do nothing but wait. Wait for Cole, wait for morning, wait while the serum in Elise's blood fought to unmake her. Elise stirred suddenly, her body arching, a small cry escaping her lips. Kael's head shot up, a snarl tearing from his throat. Nora clutched her daughter, holding her still until the spasm passed. Her small body sagged back, trembling, whispering one last time. Red, everywhere. Nora pressed her forehead to hers, tears spilling unchecked. "No. You're here. With me. With us. You're not going anywhere." She kissed her child's damp skin, tasting salt and fever.
Kyle pressed his muzzle against her arm again, a steady weight that kept her from falling into despair. For the rest of the night, Nora did not move from that bed. She cooled towels, whispered prayers she hadn't said since she was a girl, and kept her eyes fixed on the rise and fall of Elise's chest. Kyle never left his post. His growls filled the silence like a drumbeat, a warning to the unseen, a vow to the dying light. And Nora knew, if they lost Elise tonight, the war was already over. The night had become a blur of damp cloths, whispered reassurances, and Kyle's steady growls in the dark. By the time the first bruised colors of dawn bled through the blinds, Nora felt like she had aged a decade in hours. Elise was still alive, but barely. Her small frame lay limp, skin hot as a coal, her lips pale and cracked. Each shallow breath seemed to scrape at the air. Clara had cried herself to exhaustion, and now lay curled against her twin, her hand never leaving Elise's. Nora sat at the edge of the bed, shoulders hunched, her head bowed close to Kyle's. His steady presence was the only thing anchoring her against the pull of despair. His amber eyes flicked to her, then back to the door, as though reminding her, "You are not done. Not yet." Her phone lay on the dresser, its screen a black void. She hadn't called again after midnight. She hadn't wanted to sound weak, hadn't wanted to admit how fast Elise was failing. But now, as the weight of her daughter's fever pressed down like a stone, pride no longer mattered. She snatched up the phone, hands shaking, and dialed Cole's number. It rang once, twice, then clicked. "Cole. General. It's Nora." Her voice broke on the name. Instantly the tone shifted. "Report." Nora's throat closed. She forced the words out, jagged. "Elise is burning up. She collapsed last night. She keeps whispering about red dreams. Her pulse is weak. Her skin's... God, it's like she's fading in front of me." Silence stretched across the line. Then Cole exhaled, long and sharp, like steel cooling. "Listen to me, Captain. Look at her right now." Nora did. Elise's chest lifted faintly, then fell, shallow. Kyle nosed the child's hand, whining low. "She's still breathing," Cole said firmly. "As long as she's breathing, you do not surrender. You hear me?" Nora's jaw tightened, tears burning her eyes. "She's 8 years old, Adriana. 8. And someone has been using her like a lab rat. If I lose her..." "You won't," Cole cut in, voice like a blade. "Not if I have anything to say about it. Hold on, Captain. I'm sending a team." The words hit like a lifeline tossed into storm water. Nora pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes, choking back a sob. "A team? How fast?" "We're mobilizing now," Cole replied. "This isn't local law enforcement anymore. I'm pulling specialists, medical and tactical, people I trust, people who owe me. They'll be wheeling up within the hour." Nora swallowed hard. "And me? What will I do until then?" Cole's voice softened, just enough to sound human beneath the command. "You do what you've always done. You hold the line." Nora closed her eyes, the old battlefield phrase clawing at her. Hold the line. She had said it to her squad before firefights. She had whispered it over the radio when everything looked lost. And now it was being spoken back to her, not about a war in a desert, but about her daughter in a quiet house in Ashwood Pines. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "Yes, you can.
Cole's tone sharpened. Because you don't have a choice. You're a soldier, Nora. And now you're a mother fighting for her daughters. That's 2 reasons you don't get to break. Nora's chest heaved. She stared at Elise, her fragile body burning with fever, and then at Clara, clutching her hand with blind faith. She looked at Kael, stationed like a stone guardian, his growl a steady drumbeat against fear. No breaking, she murmured, as if reminding herself. No surrender. Cole must have heard the shift in her tone, because she said simply, "That's it. Good. Send me the files, the footage, anything you haven't already. My team will land near you by tomorrow. When they arrive, you're no longer alone in this fight." Nora's grip tightened around the phone. "And Rachel?" "She's part of this, Adriana. I know it." "Then she'll answer when the time comes," Cole said. "For now, keep her close enough to watch, but far enough not to trust. My team will handle the rest." Nora let the words settle, a strange calm threading through the panic. She wasn't just a desperate mother now. She was part of an operation again, one with reinforcements coming. Still, the ache inside her did not ease. She whispered so quiet Cole might not have heard. "If I lose Elise..." "You won't," Cole repeated, fierce. "But if you do, then we'll make sure those responsible wish they hadn't been born. That's a promise." Nora closed her eyes, a tear slipping free. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Survive the night, Captain. Survive, and be ready to move when we get there." The line went dead. For a long time, Nora sat still, the silence of the house pressing around her. Then she set the phone down, leaning forward to press her forehead against Kael's. His steady breath warmed her skin, his fur grounding her back to earth. "She's sending help," Nora whispered to him. "We just have to hold on." Kael blinked, slow and deliberate, his tail tapping once against the floor. Then he rose, pacing to the window, standing tall as he scanned the street below. His body was taut, ready. Nora turned back to her daughters. Clara stirred, lifting her head, her eyes wide and tired. "Is Elise?" "She's still here," Nora said softly, brushing hair from her daughter's face. "And she's going to stay here. I promise." Clara nodded faintly, trusting her, because children didn't know the weight of broken promises yet. Nora sat back, gripping the vials through her jacket pocket, the documents tucked into her bag. The evidence was real. The crime is undeniable. Reinforcements were on the way, and until they arrived, she would hold the line, for her daughters, for Sarah, for herself. No surrender. The morning light broke weak and colorless over Ashwood Pines. Inside Rachel's house, tension coiled like wire ready to snap. Nora hadn't slept. She paced the window, hand on her phone, the other on her holster. On the couch, Clara held Elise, who burned with fever. Kael pressed against them both like a living shield. Headlights cut the mist. A black SUV glided to the curb, silent and precise. Nora exhaled. "They're here." Rachel appeared in the doorway. "Who's here?" "Stay out of this," Nora snapped. She crouched by her girls, brushing Clara's hair. "Sweetheart, we're leaving. No questions." Clara nodded, clutching Elise's hand. A coded knock rattled the door. Nora opened it to 3 figures in tactical black. The leader, a tall woman with cropped hair, spoke briskly. "Captain Vance, General Cole sends regards. We are moving now." A medic scanned Elise on the spot. Nora's instinct screamed to pull her back, but the woman steadied her arm. "We're here to keep her alive."
Kyle growled low until Nora whispered, "Easy. They're with us." Rachel tried again, voice sharp. "This is my house. You can't just—" Nora whirled on her, fury spilling. "Your house. You let them inject my daughters under your roof." Rachel flinched. "You don't understand." "No. I understand enough." Nora turned away. "We're done here." The team flanked them outside. Elise was eased into the SUV, Kyle leaping in after Clara climbing in close. Nora slid between them, one hand on Elise's chest, the other gripping Clara's fingers. Rachel's figure shrank in the rear glass. Unreadable. Fear, anger, guilt. Nora pressed her forehead against the cold window. Whatever answers Rachel had could wait. One mission mattered. Get them out alive. The SUV pushed through mist toward River Point, a grey fortress veiled as an abandoned complex. Gates opened by coded signal. Cameras pivoted silently. Inside, sterile corridors hummed with ventilation, smelling of bleach and steel. Elise was rushed on a stretcher, her skin hot, her lips cracked. Clara clung to Cale, who paced beside her, every step protective. Nora followed, her chest tight with every glance at her daughter. In a clinical suite, two physicians waited. Dr. Annika Melrose, eyes sharp behind rimless glasses, and Dr. Gregory Lau, a biochemist whose hands moved fast. Elise was placed on a bed, sensors snapping into place. Gregory drew blood, frowned even before results appeared. "This isn't natural. Blood cells swollen, density irregular." Nora set files on the counter. "Helix core, trials on juveniles, vials labeled with my daughter's names, a serum marked red line." Annika's lips pressed thin. "Run it." The analyzer whirred. Data scrolled. Gregory exhaled. "Synthetic serum confirmed. It's rewriting her blood from the inside." Nora's stomach dropped. "Rewriting?" Annika met her gaze. "Assimilation." "They're forcing genetic restructuring." Elise stirred, whispering about red dreams. Clara whimpered into Kyle's fur. "Can you stop it?" Nora demanded. The doctors exchanged a look. Annika hesitated. "There may be a way, but not safe." Gregory pulled up records. "Your blood, Captain. A rare genetic immunity. You passed some to Clara. Elise less so. That's why she's failing." Nora stiffened. "So, the cure is me?" "Yes," Annika said simply. "Your immunity could override the serum. If we filter your cells, we may give her a chance." Nora's voice was steady. "Then take it," Gregory warned. "The transfer is dangerous. You'll weaken, possibly collapse." Nora brushed Elise's hair back. "I'll bleed for her. Prep it." The suite chilled to preserve equipment. Machines hummed, monitors beeped steady. Nora sat on a gurney, Elise pale beside her, Clara clutching Kale on a chair between them. Annika swabbed her arm. "We'll draw immune plasma, filter antibodies, then transfuse directly." "Do it," Nora said. The needle slid in. Blood spiraled through tubing into the chamber, separating into fractions. Nora gritted her teeth as the pull quickened, vision swimming. Kyle pressed his chin to her bed, amber eyes steady. Clara slipped her hand into Nora's. "I'm okay, sweetheart," Nora whispered, though sweat slicked her brow. Annika. Filtration complete. Beginning transfer. Enriched plasma flowed into Elise's veins. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, Elise's chest hitched stronger, her lips parted with a steadier breath. Nora exhaled, relief cutting through fog. "Is it working?" Gregory nodded. vitals responding, fever easing. But Nora's body sagged. Black spots crowded her vision. Kyle whined, pushing at her wrist. Clara cried, "Mommy, stop! Don't give too much." Nora squeezed her hand. "This is how I fight for her." Alarms shrilled. Annika barked orders. "Slow the draw." "Fluids. Now." Nora muttered weakly. "Don't stop. She needs it." "You can't save her if you're unconscious," Annika snapped. But Elise's cheeks flushed faint pink, her brow drying. She looked alive again. Nora's tears blurred her sight. "Worth it. Every drop is worth it." Gregory's voice cut sharp. "Vitals dropping. She's crashing." "Enough," Annika ordered. The line was cut, saline rushing in. Nora slumped, whispering, "Status." Annika checked. Elise's monitors steadied. A small smile touched her lips. "Stabilized. She's climbing back." Relief broke Nora's chest wide open. Clara scrambled onto her bed, hugging her tight. "You did it, Mommy." Nora wrapped her weak arm around her daughter. "No, we did." Kyle pressed against her shoulder, a solid anchor. She rested her hand on his scarred muzzle. "Good boy. Watch them. Don't let anyone close." His amber eyes promised he wouldn't. As Elise's breathing evened, the monitors steadied into the rhythm of hope. Nora closed her eyes, drained but resolute. She had given her blood, nearly her life, but she had bought her daughter another dawn. And in war, that was everything. Riverpoint slept under a blanket of midnight silence, its corridors humming with machines that never stopped. Locks, scanners, armed patrols, all designed to keep threats out. But betrayal slipped through anyway. At 01:47 a.m., a muted ping hit a guard's wrist, unauthorized access to Sub-Level 2. A door swiped with a badge long retired. Minutes later, they cornered the intruder in the archival hall, caught in sterile white glare. Rachel Monroe. Her auburn hair was pulled tight, face pale, lab coat stolen, badge trembling in her hand. The guards pinned her before she could run. She didn't fight. She only whispered, "Tell Nora I need to explain." By the time Nora arrived with Kyle at her side, Rachel stood cuffed under the lights. For a heartbeat, memories stabbed through, bedtime stories, birthdays, hair brushed back from small faces. Now, she was a prisoner. "Rachel." Nora's voice cracked with fury. Rachel's chin lifted, defiant and shaking. "I didn't mean." "Didn't mean." Nora stepped close until the guards retreated. "You let them bleed my daughters. Called it care. Call it protection." Rachel flinched. "I tried to protect them. You think I wanted this? I love them. You don't betray the people you love." Kyle's growl rumbled low, amber eyes locked on her. Rachel's composure cracked. Helix Corps promised resources. They said Clara and Elise would survive what no other child could. They said they were special. "They're children," Nora hissed. "And you handed them over like specimens." Rachel's shoulders curled. "If I refused, they'd be taken anyway. At least this way, I could slow it down, make sure it wasn't fatal." Nora's fists clenched. "You rationed poison and called it mercy." Rachel's voice sharpened with guilt. "You left them, Nora. Deployment after deployment. I was the one feeding them, raising them, and when the choice came, I couldn't lose everything, so I bargained." "No." Nora leaned close, voice lethal calm. "You gambled, and Elise nearly died in my arms."
Silence crushed the hall. Rachel's lips trembled. I thought I could control it. You can't control monsters by feeding them children. Kyle growled louder, teeth bared. Nora steadied him, never looking away. You owe me nothing, but you owe my daughters the truth, and you'll give it. To me, to General Cole, to anyone who asks. Rachel's defiance sagged into silence. The guards pulled her away. Nora caught her wrist briefly, cold metal between them, a flicker of history passing like a wound reopening. Then her voice hardened. You had one task: keep them safe. And you failed. Rachel's eyes brimmed, but she said nothing as the guards led her down the sterile hall. Nora stood rigid. Kyle pressed tight against her leg. Beneath the fury came something colder. Clarity. Rachel wasn't just weak. She was proof of how deep Helix Core's claws ran. Proof that trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. She buried her hands in Kyle's fur. His heartbeat thudded steady beneath her palm. Not you, she whispered. Never you. His growl softened, steady as a vow. Nora rose, spine straight. Rachel was no longer guardian or ally. She was evidence, and evidence meant they were closer to burning Helix Core down. The interrogation room was a white cube, bolted table, 2 chairs, fluorescent light buzzing. Rachel sat cuffed, shadows under her eyes, lips chewed raw. Nora watched from behind the 2-way mirror, arms crossed, Kyle alert at her heel. His reflection was a dark shadow in the glass. Amber eyes locked on Rachel. General Adriana Cole entered first, dropping a thick file onto the table with a sharp crack. Rachel, Cole said evenly, you were caught breaching a secure facility with a stolen badge. That alone buries you for decades. Rachel flinched. You don't understand? No, Cole cut her off. You're here to decide how much of your soul you want to salvage. Start with this. Who gave you the badge? Rachel's gaze darted to the mirror, as if searching for Nora. Cole leaned closer, voice like steel. Answer. Rachel whispered. Marcus Hale. The name struck like a gunshot. Behind the glass, Nora went rigid. Cale growled, hackles bristling. Cole's face stayed stone. Marcus Hale is dead. 5 years. Rachel shook her head violently. That's what they want you to think. He staged it. He's alive, running operations again, Iron Hollow Station. Cole's eyes narrowed. The Ranger facility in the Northern Ridge? Rachel nodded fast, words spilling now. They gutted it. Reinforced sublevels. Turned it into a lab. Everything funnels there. Supplies, shipments, trials. He's using it as his core. Cole slid a satellite photo across the table. A gray smudge of buildings among trees. What kind of trials? Rachel's throat worked. Her voice cracked. Children. Be specific. Her eyes darted again toward the mirror, then dropped. Low visibility. Orphans. Runaways. Kids from broken families. No one misses. Easy to take. Easy to bury. Nora's nails bit into her arms behind the glass. Kyle's growl vibrated against her leg, echoing her fury. Rachel's voice grew hoarse. He screens them for markers. Genetics, resilience. Clara and Elise, your immunity made them perfect candidates. I thought if I stayed close, I could protect them. Cole's palm slammed the table, making Rachel flinch. You don't protect children by handing them to a butcher. You protect them by burning him out. Rachel sagged. You don't know Hale. He's brilliant, ruthless. He believes evolution demands sacrifice. He'll never stop. He said himself, for every child lost, 100 benefits.
Cole's eyes cut like blades. He's not saving the future. He's preying on it. Rachel wept, her voice breaking. That's why I tried to take the files. Proof. You thought you could trade your way back to him, Cole snapped. Not redemption, self-preservation. Rachel's silence was admission. Cole gathered the files, her voice final. You've given us enough. Marcus Hale, Iron Hollow, children. That's a start. If you're lying, one word, I'll see you buried. Rachel nodded, broken. Cole left, door slamming behind her. Nora's reflection stared pale back at her in the mirror. Clara, Elise, perfect candidates. Her fists clenched until blood beaded her palms. Cale pressed close, steady and loyal. Nora whispered the name like venom. Marcus Hale. There was no rumor now. He was a target. Riverpoint never truly slept, but the recovery suite felt like a fragile pocket of silence. Elise lay weak but stable, monitors marking each breath. Clara curled beside her, their hands clasped, as if afraid they'd drift apart. Nora sat at the edge of the bed, shoulders bowed, hands locked hard on her knees. She had faced death in deserts and cockpits, but never like this. Never when the battlefield was her children's bodies. Rachel's confession still rang. Hale, alive. Iron Hollow. Children stolen, because no one would ask. The thought turned her stomach to stone. Cale shifted from his post at the door, padding to her side, pressing his head into her thigh. His amber eyes met hers, steady as they had been in war zones. Nora's hand slid into his fur, the heat of him grounding her. She leaned over Elise's damp hair. I will end this, she whispered. No one touches you again. Not while I live. Clara stirred, whispering, Mommy? Her grey eyes were wide, fragile. Will the bad people come back? The words cut deep. Nora kissed her forehead, voice firm. No, I won't let them. I promise. Clara studied her mother's face, then nodded once, curling closer to Elise. Trust, absolute. Nora leaned back, exhaustion crashing, but mind sharper than ever. She looked at Cale, scarred muzzle resting heavy on her lap. We've fought wars before. Now we fight another. Not for orders. For them. Cale pressed harder against her hand, sealing the pact without words. Nora lifted her gaze to her daughters, fragile but breathing. She thought of Rachel's bargains, Hale's empire built on children's blood. Monsters weren't bargained with. They were hunted, cornered, and ended. She raised Kyle's muzzle, meeting his eyes. Tomorrow we move, Iron Hollow. We end it at the root. The monitor beside Elise beeped steadier now, the rhythm of hope. Nora laid her hand over both girls' clasped fingers, Kyle at their side, the four of them bound in a vow. Her voice was no longer a whisper, but a promise carried into sterile air. This ends with me. The forest breathed in silence. Snow fell in soft sheets, muffling every sound but the crunch of boots. The ridge loomed ahead, jagged against the silver sky. Iron Hollow. Once a ranger station, now a ruin hiding something darker beneath. Nora crouched behind a snow-dusted boulder. Kyle pressed to her side, ears forward, every muscle drawn taut. Behind them, General Adriana Cole's tactical team fanned out in a silent half-moon, rifles low, breath steaming in the cold. From a distance, the station looked abandoned, wood rotted, roof sagging, windows boarded. But faint light leaked from cracks, too regular to be natural. Recon drones had already shown the truth. Heat signatures pulsed below. Cole crouched beside Nora. 3 guards outside. Sub-levels active. Nora's gaze narrowed. That's where Hale will be. Then we end this tonight. Kyle let out a low growl, cut short by Nora's hand on his neck. Easy. Soon. She thought of Rachel's confession. Low visibility children. Of Elise's fever. Clara's trembling voice. Will the bad people come back? No, they wouldn't. The team advanced through skeletal trees, moonlight glinting off their weapons. The chemical stench grew stronger, sharp and metallic against the clean snow. Kyle froze, ears sharp, and gave a single clipped bark. Contact, whispered a soldier. Near the fence, a guard in black tactical gear walked lazily, baton loose in his hand. He lifted his radio, then Kyle lunged. The shepherd hit hard, teeth sinking into the man's arm, dragging him into the snow. Nora was there in seconds. At her command, Kyle released, growl still vibrating. The guard lay subdued, radio silenced. Clear, Nora whispered. Cole's nod was brisk. Move. They'll sweep soon. They slipped past the fence. Up close, the ranger station's disguise was obvious. Steel bracing behind wood, cameras hidden in eaves, heat vents cut into the ground. Not decay, camouflage. At the north wall, a steel door lay buried under moss. The charge blinked green. 3, 2, 1. The muffled pop gave way to stale air, chemicals, bleach, and beneath it, the sour tang of blood. They slipped inside. Fluorescent bulbs flickered. Crates and tanks lined the halls, machinery humming below like a heartbeat in stone. Iron Hollow was alive. Deeper, Nora halted at a reinforced door. Kyle bristled, nose lifting, then stepped back with a bark, hackles raised. Something's inside, Nora whispered. Cole's voice crackled in her ear. Proceed. The charge blew. The door swung open, and the stench hit. Rows of beds filled the chamber, each holding a child. Dozens, restrained with straps, IV lines glowing with faint red serum. Their breaths shallow, machines keeping them suspended between waking and sleep. Nora's chest clenched. Clara and Elise could have been here. Should have been here. She touched the wrist of a boy, maybe 7, curls damp with sweat. His eyelids fluttered. His cracked voice rasped. Are you the soldier with the dog? Nora's throat broke. Yes, sweetheart. Kyle lowered himself until his nose brushed the boy's hand. The boy's lips curved faintly. Then, we're safe. Nora gripped his hand, tears burning. You're safe now. Across the room, a girl whimpered. Kyle moved to her bedside, resting his head against the mattress. At first she flinched. Then her small hand turned weakly, fingers threading into his fur. Her sob quieted into steady breaths. Nora pressed her fist against her mouth, forcing herself forward, touching wrists, checking pulses, whispering to each child. Every bruise, every puncture mark seared into memory. Cole's agents began cutting restraints, calling for medevac. But Nora's voice was for the children alone. You're not experiments. You're going home. Kyle's eyes caught hers across the room, steady and fierce. Not alone, not anymore. Then the sound came, a metallic click. The far door opened. He stepped through. Marcus Knox, Tall, gaunt, surgical coat hanging like vestments. A scar carved down his cheek. His eyes burned with zeal, and in one hand gleamed a syringe of glowing crimson. "Well," he said calmly. "The soldier with the dog." His gaze lingered on Cale with contempt. Poetic. Nora rose between him and the children. "It's over, Knox." "Over?" His tone was amused. "This is the beginning. Evolution demands sacrifice." Elise's fevered face, Clara's whispered fear, Rachel's betrayal, they burned through Nora like fire. "You call bleeding children evolution?" "They are pioneers," Knox said coldly. "Every civilization builds on the bones of the few. Soldiers die, workers suffer. Children adapt faster."
"They are the crucible of tomorrow," Cale growled, storm brimming in his chest. Nora's voice shook with fury. "They are lives, and they are mine to protect." Knox sneered. "You think loyalty will save them?" "No," Nora said, her hand gripping Kyle's fur. "We will." Cole's agents closed in, rifles raised. Knox spread his arms, syringe glinting. "Kill me, and I become a martyr. Arrest me, and my data lives beyond here. Redline is already in their blood." Nora's breath came sharp. Rage demanded she pull the trigger. But Kyle pressed into her thigh, steady eyes anchoring her. Proof mattered more than vengeance. Her voice iced. "You're not a martyr. You're a coward hiding behind children, and tonight the world will see you for what you are." Cole's agents surged. Knox stumbled back, but Kyle lunged first, slamming him to the floor. The syringe skittered. Nora crushed it under her boot, crimson fluid hissing across tile. She crouched over him. "You don't decide their future. Not anymore." Knox laughed, bloodied lips curling. "There are other labs, other children. You'll chase ghosts forever." Nora stood. "Take him alive." The agents wrenched his arms back, cuffs biting into wrists. He smiled through blood. "Evolution demands sacrifice." Nora turned away. She wouldn't give him her rage. Instead, she returned to the boy who had whispered. His eyes were open now, fixed on her and Cale. "It's over," she told him softly. "He won't touch you again." Cale padded back, resting his head on her hand. She stroked his muzzle, whispering, "We did it." The boy's lips curved faintly. "I told them you'd come, you and the dog." Tears stung her eyes. "We're here, and we're not leaving you." Behind them, Knox was dragged out, his words fading into the corridor. But Nora heard only Kyle's breath, the children's fragile heartbeats, and her own vow hardening to iron. This wasn't just survival. It was a victory. And it had been won by loyalty. The stairwell spiraled down into Iron Hollow's belly, the air colder with every echoing step. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their flicker stuttering across slick concrete. Nora led, hand tight on the railing, Kyle silent at her side, amber eyes sharp in the gloom. Two agents followed with rifles raised, their faces grim. At the bottom waited a heavy steel door. Faded letters warned, "Data Core, authorized access only." Nora's stomach clenched. Not the operating chambers, not the beds. This was where Hale's obsession lived. Proof. The charge went off with a muffled pop. Nora stepped in first. The room stretched cavernous, lined with server towers glowing red and green, fans humming like a mechanical heartbeat. Cables coiled across the floor, converging at the central console. Kale padded to her heel, gaze sweeping shadows. Nora touched the console. The screen blinked to life. A password prompt. Cole's agents plugged in a decryption unit. 30 seconds. Her fingers gripped the edge. 30 seconds. And the world would see Hale's ledger. The screen opened. Rows of files filled the display. Case numbers, ages, blood types. Nora scrolled faster, her pulse hammering. Hundreds, thousands. Children. Each reduced to sterile lines. Male, 7, unclaimed. Female, 9, foster system. Male, 5, status, deceased. Her vision blurred, and then she saw them. Sample 05. Sample 06. Clara. Elise. Her chest caved. They weren't unique. Just another line in an endless ledger of stolen lives. Kyle whined softly, pressing his head into her hip. She dropped her hand to his neck. They weren't numbers, Kyle. They were kids. They were supposed to be safe. The agent yanked the drive free. We've got it. Every record. Nora blinked tears away, her jaw hardening. Back it up 3 times. These children don't vanish again. She pressed her fingertips to the screen. This isn't just for Clara and Elise. It's for all of you. Kyle leaned against her hand, his steady presence an anchor. The alarm blared suddenly, shrill and metallic, red lights strobing. The floor shuddered as systems shifted to lockdown. Cole's voice cut through Nora's earpiece. Knox is moving. He's headed for the purge system. If he reaches it, he wipes everything. Nora's blood chilled. The copies they carried were nothing without the full architecture. Proof would vanish. Which way? She barked. Kyle was already moving, nose low, body taut, growl rising. Nora sprinted after him, agents pounding behind. Corridors flashed red-white under alarms. They tore past empty bays, the faint cries of freed children echoing behind. Kyle led unerring, claws striking steel until the hall opened wide. At the far end, Knox sprinted, coat flaring, purge fob in his hand. He slammed it against the scanner. A door groaned open, blue glow spilling from the core lab. Knox! Nora's shout cracked the chamber. He turned, triumph burning in his eyes. You can't stop progress, Captain. Evolution burns the weak away. He darted for the console. Kale. The shepherd leapt, a streak of muscle and fury. He slammed Knox sideways, the fob spinning out of reach. Teeth clamped on his coat sleeve, pinning him inches from the console. Nora kicked the fob aside, weapon leveled. End of the line. Knox spat blood, sneering. You think saving files will stop me? There will always be more children. Always more parents too broken to fight. You can't protect them all. Nora's chest heaved. Clara's whisper. Elise's fever. The boy who had asked, "Are you the soldier with the dog?" Her voice cut like a blade. Maybe not all, but these, and the world will know your name for what it is. Rot. Cole's team swarmed, wrenching his arms back. Kyle released on command, still bristling. Knox sagged in restraints, bloodied but smiling. Sacrifice, he hissed. Evolution demands it. Nora ignored him. She smashed the fob against the console. Sparks spat. The purge system went dark. The data was safe. Her hand pressed Kyle's head, grounding herself in his warmth. You stopped him, Kyle. You saved them. His tail thumped once against the steel. Night air split with rotor blades. Helicopters circled above the ridge, searchlights slicing the storm. Snow swirled heavy, blanketing pines white. The clearing outside Iron Hollow swarmed with agents. Children were carried out one by one, bundled in blankets, IVs removed, oxygen masks fitted. For the first time that night, Nora let herself believe they would live. She steadied a shivering boy in her arms, his curls damp with snow. His fragile eyes never left Kyle. "Is he coming with us?" Nora followed the gaze. Kyle sat in the snow, ears pricked, amber eyes fixed on the boy. At her nod, he padded forward, pressed his nose to the child's hand. The boy's lips curved weakly. "Tell the dog." "Thank you." Nora's throat tightened. She covered his hand with hers. "You can tell him yourself. He hears every word." Kyle's tail wagged once, slow and sure. The boy's smile lingered as exhaustion pulled him under. Inside the helicopter, more children huddled, pale but alive. A girl clutched a threadbare teddy. Another clung to her sibling's hand, refusing to let go. Kyle moved down the row of stretchers, brushing noses and hands, steadying each one in silence. Cole appeared at the hatch, her voice sharp. "Knox is secured. He'll never see daylight again." Nora's eyes stayed on the children. "Good. That's where he belongs." As the doors closed, she crouched beside Kale, forehead pressed to his collar. "They'll never forget you. Neither will I." His breath warmed her cheek, tail tapping once. The helicopter lifted, the ridge shrinking to shadow below. Snow spiraled in soft whirls, not to erase, but to bless what had been saved. Beside her, the boy stirred, whispering through sleep, "The soldier with the dog." Nora closed her eyes, hand in Kyle's fur. "That's right, and we're not going anywhere." For the first time since Ashwood Pines, she felt it. A fragile ember she hadn't dared name. Hope. The lake lay still, a mirror of autumn light. The cabin stood weathered but solid at the water's edge, its cedar walls creaking with age. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe. Inside, laughter tumbled from the kitchen. Clara and Elise sat at the pine wood table, their hair messy, faces streaked with flour, each trying to braid the other's hair with disastrous results. Clara's braid sagged sideways. Elise's stuck up in wild angles. "It looks like a bird's nest," Elise giggled. "It's art," Clara insisted. "Messy art still counts." Nora stirred a pot on the stove, the scent of garlic and tomatoes filling the air. Spaghetti had never been her specialty, but tonight it didn't matter. Tonight was about giving her daughters something ordinary. Kyle stretched near the hearth, one eye lazily tracking the girls, his tail thumping softly now and then. Scarred, leaner than before, he seemed younger here, at peace. "Dinner at 5, Nora called. Instantly, both girls appeared with plates in hand. "You said that 10 minutes ago," Clara accused. "Soldier's time runs differently," Nora teased, wiping flour from Elise's cheek. 5 minutes can mean 15. They rolled their eyes but smiled. Around the table, spaghetti disappeared fast. Clara slurped. Elise twirled carefully. Kyle nudged under the table until Nora dropped him garlic bread. Forks clinked, voices overlapped, and for the first time in months, life sounded whole again. Later, the girls showed her the fridge, covered in crayon drawings, crooked chimneys, a lake, 2 stick-figure sisters, and always Kyle, sometimes larger than the house itself. Elise pointed at one where he stood between the sisters, a heart above them. Clara frowned. "You made his ears too pointy." Kyle tilted his head at the sound of his name. Nora laughed, hugging them close. I think he approves of all of them. At dusk, they curled on the couch, blanket across their laps. Nora read from a worn storybook, while Clara leaned against her shoulder, and Elise against Kyle, her fingers buried in his fur. The red marks on their arms had faded. The shadows under their eyes had lightened. For the first time in months, they looked like children again. Nora brushed her fingers through Kyle's fur, whispering, "You did this. You gave them back their childhood." His tail thumped once, steady as truth. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, warmth reigned. Messy braids, spaghetti stains, laughter taped to the fridge. Survival had become home. Weeks later, polished wood and flags framed an auditorium. Uniforms filled the rows. Cameras clicked softly. Nora sat near the front with her daughters. Clara fidgeted with her dress hem. Elise clutched Cale's collar, as though afraid someone might take him away. General Cole's voice rang out. "Tonight, we honor courage, not just on the battlefield, but in the hidden wars fought in silence." One soldier stood firm, but it was her partner, a German shepherd named Kyle, whose instincts saved lives that might otherwise have been lost. A Marine stepped forward with a black box. Cole clipped the metal onto Kyle's harness. The shepherd stood steady, his tail giving one deliberate thump. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered. Clara and Elise clapped furiously. Elise whispered into Kyle's ear, "You're the bravest boy." Nora stroked his muzzle, murmuring, "You earned this." Then Cole's voice shifted. "Captain Nora Vance, would you join us on stage?" The spotlight swung. Nora rose slowly, Cale pressing against her side. Cole met her with a solemn nod. "Captain, for courage beyond duty, you are hereby awarded no." The word silenced the hall. "I accept nothing for myself," Nora said, her voice firm. What happened in Ashwood Pines and Iron Hollow wasn't a victory. It was a failure children paid for with scars they'll carry forever. No commendation erases that. Her hand brushed Kyle's fur. "He deserves this, always. But me? I don't want a ribbon. I want change, prevention, a system that keeps monsters from hiding in our shadows again." The room stilled, even cameras lowering. Cole's eyes softened. "As you wish, Captain." Back at her seat, Clara whispered, "Why didn't you take it?" "Because medals don't protect children," Nora told her. "But people can." Clara nodded slowly. Elise leaned against Kyle, already understanding. The office was small. Brick walls, scuffed wood, maps with red threads pinned across states, not polished, but alive. Around the table sat veterans, medics, analysts, scarred in different ways, drawn here for the same reason. Nora stood at the head, her daughter's drawings taped on the wall behind her. Kyle stretched at her feet, his ears flicking at each murmur. She spread a folder on the table. Photographs, sealed files, corporate shells. At the center, one stamped name, Helix Corps. "We call it the Whisper Initiative," she said, "because the things we fight never shout. They whisper, in labs, in shipments, in the marks left on children. Silence is their weapon. Breaking it will be ours." The gray-haired veteran with a prosthetic hand leaned forward. "What's the scope? Intel? Ops?" "Both. We trace every supply chain, every missing child. We intercept when we can, expose what we can't. We make noise where there's silence." An analyst tapped at his laptop, maps blinking on the screen. At least 4 sites already match the profile. 2 domestic, 2 abroad. Nora felt Kyle shift against her boots, his warmth steady. Her hand brushed his fur. Children are not collateral, not crucibles. We saw what Nox did in Iron Hollow. It doesn't stop unless we stop it. From the back room drifted Clara and Elise's laughter, crayons scratching paper. The sound pierced the heaviness, reminding everyone what was at stake. The veteran nodded slowly. Then we're not soldiers anymore. We're guardians. The word hung in the room. Guardians. Kyle had been one all along. Now, they all would be. Nora straightened, her voice iron. Then let's begin. Plans filled the hours. Maps marked, contacts tested, roles divided. When the room emptied, Nora lingered, her hand resting on the table, her gaze on the threads crisscrossing the maps. Kyle padded to her side, pressing his head into her hip. She whispered into his fur, "We're not done, boy. But this time, we're not alone." His tail brushed the floor once, deliberate. Outside, the city moved unaware, but here, in this small room, heavy with scars and hope, the Whisper Initiative was born, not from medals, not from applause, but from a mother who refused to give up, and a dog who never left. The fire crackled low in the cabin hearth, its glow painting the walls in soft waves. Outside, snow drifted over Echo Lake, blanketing the pines in a hush that felt like prayer. For one night, the world seemed intent on peace. Nora sat on the couch with a cooling mug in her hands, wrapped in the heavy stillness of exhaustion. Weeks of rebuilding had been relentless. Doctors, paperwork, the Whisper Initiative, nights of nightmares interrupted by Kyle's steady presence at her side. But here, in this quiet, it all receded. Her daughter's voices pulled her back. Clara and Elise padded from the small bedroom, giggling, whispering in conspiratorial tones only sisters knew. Clara hid something behind her back, cheeks flushed with mischief. Nora tilted her head, smiling. "What are you two up to?" "Close your eyes," Elise ordered. Nora chuckled. "You sound like General Cole giving an order." "Mommy," Clara insisted, bouncing on her toes. "Just do it." Nora sighed with mock reluctance, set her mug aside and obeyed. She heard scuffling, paper rustling, then a hush. "You can look now," Elise whispered. The girls stood side by side, holding a sheet of paper nearly as wide as Clara's chest. Drawn in bright crayon strokes was a crooked cabin, a blue lake with squiggles that might be ducks, and 4 figures. A tall woman with long hair, 2 smaller girls with yellow braids, and a proud dog with pointed ears. Above them, in uneven letters, Mommy, us, and Kyle, safe forever. Nora's breath caught. For weeks she had carried herself with steel, refusing to falter in front of them. But here, in crayon lines, her daughters had written the thing she hadn't dared to hope. Safe. Forever. Her vision blurred. She pulled them into her arms, tears spilling into their hair. Elise whispered, "We're not scared anymore when Kyle's here, so we drew it." At his name, Kyle rose from the rug, padded over, and pressed his nose against the page like a signature. The girls giggled, stroking his fur. Nora kissed their heads fiercely. "You two saved me too. You know that?" "But you're the one who saved us," Elise protested. Nora shook her head. "No, we saved each other." Together they taped the drawing above the fireplace. It glowed in the firelight, the waxy words "safe forever" shining, as if carved in stone. To Nora, it was more sacred than any medal she'd ever worn.
Later, when the cabin quieted, Nora sat at the oak table, a mug of tea cooling, phone pressed to her ear. Static gave way to Dr. Margaret Anderson's calm, steady voice. "Captain Vance? I'll be brief. I wanted to update you after reviewing the latest reports." Nora's gaze drifted to the hallway, where giggles still rose from the bedroom. Kyle's ears flicked, but he didn't stir. Anderson continued. "Clara and Elise are remarkable. Their recovery is ahead of schedule. Emotionally, cognitively, physically. Trauma like theirs can linger for years. But I see resilience I can't take credit for. They laugh. They play. That speaks volumes." Nora closed her eyes, throat tightening. Elise bent over a sketchbook, tongue between her teeth, drawing Kyle larger than life. Clara's sudden belly laugh at dinner when sauce splattered Nora's shirt. "They're trying," she whispered. "They're healing," Anderson corrected gently. "You gave them stability. And Kyle, his presence isn't just comfort. He anchors them." Nora looked toward the fire where Kyle lay, his medal still clipped to his harness, ears twitching at every sound from the girl's room. His chest rose steady, scarred but strong. Anderson's tone softened. "You should be proud. You didn't just save their lives, you gave them a future." Nora swallowed hard. "They saved me too, Doctor." Silence, then Anderson's voice. "I believe that." The words slipped from Nora before she could stop them. "After Sarah, after the deployments, I thought I had nothing left to give. But Clara and Elise kept me from disappearing into the emptiness. They reminded me why I'm still here. Why do I have to keep fighting?" She glanced at Kyle. "And that dog. He's had more faith in me than I've ever had in myself." Anderson chuckled softly. "That's loyalty. It holds you upright when you want to collapse. Children do the same. They don't just survive you. They heal you." Nora smiled through tears as Elise's muffled voice piped from the bedroom. "Clara, don't hog the blanket." Laughter followed. "They're still kids," Nora whispered. "Exactly," Anderson said. "That's the miracle. Not the medals, not the missions, the fact that they get to be children again." The call ended soon after. Nora set the phone down, her hand lingering on it. Across the room, Kyle rose and padded over, resting his chin on her lap, amber eyes steady. She stroked his fur, whispering, "You saved me too." His tail thumped once against the floor. Her gaze lifted to the crayon drawing above the hearth. Safe forever. For the first time, she let herself believe it. The fire burned low, the cabin wrapped in silence, alive with breath and warmth. Clara and Elise had dragged their blankets to the hearth, insisting the crackle of flames sounded like Kyle's steady breathing. Now they slept soundly, cheeks flushed, fingers brushing even in dreams. Kyle lay between them and the door, his body a living wall. Every so often he lifted his head, scanned the shadows, then lowered it again. The metal on his harness glinted faintly, worn as lightly as his scars. Quiet, but undeniable. Nora stood in the doorway, a blanket around her shoulders, mug forgotten on the table. She watched first her daughters, their faces peaceful, whispers of nightmares replaced by secret jokes. And then Kyle, always Kyle. She crossed the room, kneeling beside them. She smoothed Clara's hair, adjusted Elise's quilt. Kyle lifted his head, meeting her eyes. "You did it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You brought them back to me. You brought me back too." He blinked slowly, lowered his head against Elise's arm, and let his tail brush the rug once. agreement, promise. Nora leaned back, staring into the fire. The embers pulsed, dimmed, glowed again, like an ancient heartbeat. Her chest ached, not with grief now, but with gratitude so fierce it nearly stole her breath. She thought of Ashwood Pines, of Rachel's betrayal, of Knox's defiance, of the names in Hale's files.
And then she looked here. Laughter taped to a fridge, spaghetti sauce on cheeks, 2 little girls asleep by the fire, a dog standing sentinel. Her lips parted, whispering words that rose like prayer. Some miracles aren't from heaven. Sometimes they're just a mother who refuses to give up, and a dog who never leaves. The words hung in the warm air, soft as a vow. She drew the blanket tighter, leaned against the couch, and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she let her body rest fully, trusting the quiet, trusting the guard at the door, trusting the miracle at her feet. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines. Inside, the fire dimmed to embers. And in that cabin, where loss had once reigned, love stood sentinel instead. Forever. When you look back on stories like this, it reminds us that the bond between people and dogs isn't just about companionship. It's about trust, protection, and the kind of loyalty that outlives fear. German shepherds, in particular, seem to carry a piece of our hearts in their steadfast eyes. They don't ask for medals or recognition. All they want is to stand beside us, to guard us, and to love us in ways words can't fully capture. If this story touched you, maybe it's because you felt something similar with your own dog. The quiet moments when they seem to understand more than anyone else. If you'd like to explore ways to deepen that connection, there's a resource I often point friends to. I'll leave the link below, not as a pitch, but as a gentle invitation. Take a look if it feels right. At the end of the day, what matters most isn't training or titles. It's the love that passes between you and the animal at your side. Hold on to that. It may just be the most faithful gift life gives us.